Hi guys. It's about that time again where you guys sit around watching a shitty camera as you watch me make pads for another unicycle. Today we're just going to talk about the Master and how I feel about it so far. It's an okay wheel. I like that it's 2400 watt hours, at least for the longer range Gotway batteries. But let's see. I don't know, the amount of torque is solid. I'm happy that it's a 136 volt now. You definitely do notice the power. So what I'm doing right now is I ended up chopping this little squared off area of the lower pad and the front of the pad, so I can literally just throw 1 inch or half-inch neoprene, or sorry, half-inch EVA foam to the bottom, just to be able to make a better surface for custom pads. My buddy Dennis ended up wanting to make something out of this because the stock pads are complete bullshit. What was it? So something else I did note was the jump pad made no sense, just because if you looked at it, or if it is a jump pad, I couldn't exactly tell you what the intention was, but there's some random stud above where your instep would go, but it would be way higher than a boot or a regular shoe would end up making normal contact with. So in this case, I am perfectly happy removing it and giving space for literally whatever pad setup that you ever wanted to add. So yeah, we have all the surface to throw Clark pads or pretty much anything onto it. I'm gonna flip this around and repeat the same process on the other side. Yeah, firmware pisses me off. It's not the worst thing, but what happens is they've had Gotway or Begode's had the same firmware, or not the same, but similar firmware where it's constantly dipping on hard mode. I understand for medium and soft mode where if your pedals end up dropping down, then that's nice. But problem is, when you're expecting something hard mode, you don't really want to have as much pedal dipping or any pedal dipping at all. So that ends up keeping you from being able to turn properly, or not necessarily properly, because you can turn properly with any firmware, but turn optimally without your wheel having to dip down all the way and you having to slow down to make up for the loss of positioning. What else is there to note? The LCD, I really like the size of it. It's definitely larger than the Sherman, and then it does a great job at during daytime, just because the lights are, or like at least the lettering is really big, so it makes it way easier to read when you're at speed doing whatever. Yeah, so just gonna continue making these cuts. The battery packs, they're plastic on the outside, which is kind of concerning, but at the same time I'm happy that they're not metal, because if it was metal and then if it ended up denting, then it wouldn't flex back into its original position, whereas at least plastic would have that return, or more potential for returning. Yeah, for my personal one, I'm getting it in about like 2 weeks or so, or however long it's going to be taking for air shipping. I'm getting the P42A batteries. So that's going to be able to give you that extra bit of torque and potential speed. Not that I'm going to really need it, because chances are I'm just going to limit myself to maybe 45, 50 on this thing. Because I like to ride at speeds where I can jump and feel safe when I'm landing, just to keep that from cutting out. My commute every day is on the EXN going to work, and that one I keep it at 40 just in case there's any random pothole or any random bullshit that I need to jump or avoid. But yeah. This whole kickstand type deal, it's nice to see. It's funny seeing that there's foam padding on top of that. Not that it really does anything, but it's a good novelty, I guess. If anything, if the wheel ends up landing sideways on your leg, then you have a lower likelihood of getting your leg slashed off. So that's beneficial, at least there. Yeah, so I'm just pretty much following along the edge of the battery line, just to get something going. The Knobby CST tire. I don't notice as much drifting with the CS, or no, that's a lie. I notice all the drifting, but I don't notice as much loss of control when I'm riding like on that side edge, because I've bitched about it before, but having knobby tires with a giant gap in between, you end up having like a higher tendency of, how to explain it? Yeah, having the space in between each treading. If you're in between that gap, then you end up floating off to the side, or just kind of losing that little bit of grip and control on the street I mean, on the dirt it'll help, which is great, but on the street not so much. And I figure most riders as a whole would end up riding street. Knobby tires are great just because when you're riding, you don't have to worry about as much like precision movement. You can kind of just fuck around and not cry too much when your leg positioning isn't optimal, and you don't have to deal with as many potential speed wobbles. We had one rider earlier test it out, and then he had a little bit of speed wobbling, but because it was a knobby tire, it ended up hiding a lot of that, so then he didn't have as much like of an aggressive throw around. So that was nice for him. Yeah, I got him using the half-inch EVA foam. I'm just sanding the edges I just cut just to make it something remotely pretty. I want to get a giant belt sander just to make like really large wedges, because I think that's the next step for modding and ergonomics. But I just have to get hold of some kind of wedge or some kind of a belt grinder to be able to make wedges. So if any of you guys know any like budget option for a grinder, let me know. I'll gladly pick it up and try it. Yeah, battery packs and the size of this thing. I am not a huge fan of people constantly adding range without thinking about how they're going to be setting these batteries up optimally. It works. It's skinnier, but then what happens is it's still chunky on top, and then that kind of messes up everybody's stance. So then you need to like shim out the lower end so then you can triangulate the stance and not have to deal with as much potential wobble if you have bad leg positioning. But yeah, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna throw the pedals back on. What I like also with the Master is these extra hex nuts, or the extra grub screws. Those have the purpose of keeping, they kind of follow it in motion with their pedal design, where they usually have the regular grub screws on the side, and then those pinch together onto the axle with these, I guess it's just regular plastic, little plastic shims. And then there's like a center grub screw that will pinch down onto it and then keep it from twisting up, so it's more of a friction fit rather than the usual, I guess lately they've been using the little spring steel, and then that spring steel hasn't been doing much of a job because I've heard a lot of people breaking them. So this is a nice improvement for their design. Hopefully it keeps up with all the other wheels. Other pedal on. It's nice seeing that these are coming on for stock wheels. While I still hate them, it's better than just throwing on the, like, say like the Extreme Bull. The pedals that came with it, they had no grip tape on them, and then the spikes were literally just like kind of mild pyramids. So it was the suggestion of giving you grip, but then it really didn't help you. So for anybody who has the who has a Commander, I do highly suggest you adding grip tape. Okay. The mud flap is cool. I like that it's able to be moved. So then you have a lower likelihood of breaking it off. And again, in this case, it's kind of screwed onto it. So pull this up. Yeah, so the mud flap is bolted on with two Allen keys, or two Allen screws, and that's it. That's nice to see because you've seen all like the EX, EXN, all those things. Whenever you try to install those mud flaps, you end up cutting yourself or doing something because these things are sharp. They don't really do much of a job in trying to round them off. These little stoppers for the kickstand, they're on the softer side, so it's going to be easier when you put it down, but then you're going to end up having that little bit of wobble, a little bit of play when you put it down on the ground, so then it becomes a little questionable whether or not your wheel's stable. But again, better than nothing. Suspension, some people that I know are gonna swap out the cans for sure, but again, as a stock wheel, it's not nearly as bad as I expected it to be. We ended up setting this one up to 250 psi, and then that's for me being a 200-pound rider and my buddy Dennis being, I think, around 230. So then you get more out of that. Seat design, fucking awesome, seeing that the seat is screwed on, or at least bolted on with the Allens, rather than just adhesive that never really works on this type of foam. Headlights, I don't really care for them. Part of me was hoping that they'd be like adjustable angled, but from what it looks like, it's like barely a toggle, if that. So you're kind of stuck at the angles, and then the way it throws is kind of weird. Like, it's suggesting that it's throwing off to the side pretty wide, but then I personally haven't noticed it helping me all that much when I'm riding. As far as like comparisons, I feel like the EXN gives you a little bit more, or clearly a more solid like direct light. but I don't know, I guess I have to test this out more to really figure it out, whether or not it's worth having. Trolley handle seems pretty durable. I'm happy that it's not just like blocky squares or like rectangles. There's a little bit of curvature. These screws, they're kind of like sticking out a bit, so I'm going to tighten them down. Yeah, I don't know. It's a trolley handle. The positioning's centered at least, so it's going to be easier to twist around. But as far as like pushing it and getting it to like steer as easy, who knows what's going to happen. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be breaking these trolley handles day by day. 4-pin plugs for the 136 volt charger. It has dual, and then what you have to do is you have to pull that up, and then after the trolley handle you end up having to find underneath the cap. When you put the charger plug in, the little notch for the charger is going to be on the right side. I'm glad that the seal is reasonably solid and it's tucked under the trolley handle, so you have a little bit less likelihood of losing that thing. But again, we'll find out when we get there, as people again still end up losing it. Yeah, top speed, I tried this thing out, or lifting it up. It lifted up and I ended up getting 60 miles per hour using the Gotway 50E batteries. That ended up kind of kicking ass, because realistically you should still be able to ride 55 miles an hour. That was near full charge. At 60% I was still able to get it was 62 miles per hour lift speed. So realistically that should still be able to handle 50 miles, or at least potentially closer to 50 miles per hour at 50%. Just be careful, because this is playing with new territory. Not everybody's used to high speeds, and having something with a knobby and extra weight is going to encourage more people to ride at higher speeds. But yeah, again, well, since I'm holding it in this profile, you can kind of see how it's just chunky as shit on top. But again, if you're used to having like a bow-legged stance, or if you're used to like horseback riding and your legs are growing in a fucked up stance, then have at it. You're doing great. For everybody else, you're going to want to shim these out a little bit so you're going to have more natural stance coming off to the sides. As I figure out pad setups, I'll put out more suggestions elsewhere, or just ask me via messaging or Instagram, Facebook, if you have any questions for what to do about this setup. Yeah, I mean, I hate these pads, or brake pads. I'm kind of just going to leave them for now, just because they're there, but I'm intending to just chop these off and then sand them down, just to make them all flat plane, and then just go freeform with everything down below. Whenever I get my personal one, I'm going to do the exact same thing as I just did here, but yeah, maybe just add like a secondary wedge to space out right here, just allowing for a more triangulated stance, and then again to let people ride more naturally without destroying their knees. Anyways, if you have any questions, add a comment, and I'm just gonna reply whenever I can. Anyways, you guys take care, and yeah, thanks Dennis. Goodbye. Okay, real quick, just tacked on the rest of that soft side Velcro, just on top of that little bit of EVA foam, and it looks pretty neat. Just wanted to end the video with that, and yeah, okay, bye.